Attention! At ease. I am multi-voice reviewer. I have many voices, but one opinion. And happy 4th of July, ladies and gentlemen. The kind of holiday, it makes me proud to be an American and show my patriotic side. I know I saw my patriotic side on my Captain America review. I would have reviewed that on the 4th of July, but it was Marvel month, so... oh, what the heck. Anyway, the certain kind of franchise I'm going to review for you today for the 4th of July, I'm going to review a certain franchise that I grew up as a little kid. And the certain franchise I'm going to review is this. G.I. Joe, a real American hero. That's right. That's why I'm being patriotic in this one, folks, because, well, ever since I was a kid, I was into the G.I. Joe stuff, ever since the 80s. But of course, believe it or not, it was inspired by a certain war movie made back then. You see, a long time ago during World War II, there was a certain movie became an inspiration for the action figures of G.I. Joe, and the movie they made back in the 40s starring Robert Mitchum and Burgess Meredith. And the movie, in this old dramatic war movie they made, was called The Story of G.I. Joe. You guys should look up this movie. It's a good war movie. It's about a guy who is like a military journalist, and he travels with a bunch of troops during the war, and he gets into the G.I. Joe members and start listening to their stories and what they've been through and what made them be recruited. And that became the name of a certain franchise that the company decided to make. But it didn't start out as those action figures that they made back in the 60s and 70s. G.I. Joe got popular enough that they decided to do old-fashioned comedy comic books of G.I. Joe. They decided to make it more funny for the sake of the kids. And then all of a sudden, back in the 60s and 70s, that's when they decided to make these action figures of G.I. Joes, but they didn't start out as these little small G.I. Joes. Nah, these G.I. Joes I have here were more like these. They're like these, I would say probably a 6-inch. Oh no, that's the small ones. I would say probably a 12-inch tall G.I. Joe. I kept this one as a treasure to me because this one is a classic, a very, very unique and classic G.I. Joe action figure they made. And one thing I kept noticing, one thing I can tell if these action figures are G.I. Joe, it's the thumb. If you look real close to the thumb, you can see that the thumb is in the front, is right here instead of the back. The thumbnail is over here instead of the usual back. That's where you can tell that's a G.I. Joe action figure. And the latest modern one they made is the one I have here. And of course, when they decided to make the G.I. Joe be more popular, they decided to, back in the 80s, they decided to make a certain TV show and make them really, really popular even today. Well, not anymore since they stopped doing making their toys and such. But the first series they've done was back in the 80s, and it was G.I. Joe, the American Hero. And when the G.I. Joes got popular enough, they start changing the action figure from these figurines to these. This here's my G.I. Joe action figure I have here. And how the premise go, they decided to make a certain premise. And of course, when the G.I. Joe got popular enough, Marvel made a deal with them to do a comic book series in which now Marvel no longer owns G.I. Joe, so they switch companies from Image And now it's owned by IDW, the same company who does other comic books that Hasbro own. So they make a lot of comic books with Hasbro. I wish I had the entire collection of the Clue comics, because I only have the first issue, and I like to have the graphic novel of the whole series. But anyway, back to the Joes. Now, one thing I know about the premise is that G.I. Joe is a top secret military organization. Their mission to extend freedom throughout the entire world against an evil threat who goes by the name of Cobra Commander, an evil terrorist organization threatened to rule the world. And of course, their battle cry is, "Yo, Joe!" That's their battle cry. So every time when the G.I. Joe is about ready to attack their enemy, they always yell out, "Yo, Joe!" Oh yeah, and one thing I do remember at the end of the episode, they wanted to be a good example for the kids, so they do one of those PSA shorts at the end of the episode. And also saying that famous line, "Now you know, and knowing is half the battle." Actually, I kind of like that. Knowing is half the battle. Now, and of course, the most popular G.I. Joes in the cartoons, of course, they made tons of characters because of the toys, but here are the most famous ones. G.I. Joe, roll call! Duke, first sergeant, sir. Gung Ho. Marine from Louisiana, sir. Scarlet, Snake Eyes Archer of the G.I. Joe team and first female of the team. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. This G.I. Joe member cannot talk, so he cannot announce himself, but I'm going to do the talking for him. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most popular G.I. Joe and also a ninja of the G.I. Joe team, which is Snake Eyes, Commando Ninja of the G.I. Joe team. Now, the only reason about Snake Eyes you should know about, the reason why he wears a mask and never talks, is because that Snake Eyes here, he had gone through a horrible helicopter accident. And that helicopter accident scarred his face really bad, and it damaged his vocal cords. That's why he can never talk. And of course, hinting that Snake Eyes has a thing for Scarlet. Oh, and it's the enemies of the G.I. Joe team. Hello, you infidels. I am Cobra Commander, leader of the Cobra team. Cobra!
I am Deathstroke, Cobra's right-hand man and arms dealer. Although, I always think Cobra Commander is a fool. That's why I have my own army, the Destro team.
Destro!
Hello, darling. I am Baroness, Cobra's infiltrator and spy. And love interest for Destro.
And I am Dr. Mindbender, Cobra's mad scientist. I am Storm Shadow, Cobra Commander's master ninja and rival to Snake Eyes.
And I'm Zartan, Cobra's master of disguise. I always disguise myself for looking like all the people. Ha 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 ha! Here are the other G.I. Joe teams, folks.
Hello, I am Dusty, G.I. Joe's Desert Troop.
Hey, what happened to your arm?
Oh yes, one of those cyborgs created by Cobra called the Battle Android Troopers, they ripped my arm off, so I took one of their arms as a replacement, and I got used to my mechanical arm.
Well, I see that suits you.
Yeah, and I am Jinx, Snake Eye's cousin, and second in command of the Rushikage clan, the ninja group that is a part of G.I. Joe.
And that is the usual member of the G.I. Joe team, folks. And I'm proud to be a member of the G.I. Joe team. And of course, there was one member of the G.I. Joe team, which I cannot bring over. He goes by the name of Sergeant Slaughter. He started out as a pro wrestler in the WWE. Well, actually, it was WWF. He was a pro wrestler at WWF, and he got so popular that he made a deal with Hasbro to make G.I. Joe visions of him and have him doing the voice and the cartoon. And this is what Sergeant Slaughter looks like, right here. So one thing I would say, fight the good fight, Sergeant Slaughter. Now, the G.I. Joe series has been around for a long time. And ever since when the Transformers decided to make their own movie, they decided to make G.I. Joe decided to make their own G.I. Joe movie, which is G.I. Joe the Movie, where they introduce a new character who is supposed to be Duke's brother and also a love interest for Jinx. Oh yeah, and a little known fact. When they made the Transformers movie, the original Transformers movie, they killed off Optimus Prime. And the Transformer movie decided to do the same thing since they created Serpentor, a human Cobra leader who always says, "This I command!" He almost killed Duke, but they said that he was unconscious. He's not dead. So he survived. And it's not how I feel on the new G.I. Joe movie, which I'm going to talk about later. Anyway, after the end of G.I. Joe the movie, they were hinting that there was a top secret people who's been around during the primal age, the caveman era. And Cobra was one of them, but he was kicked out of his own land in order to become Cobra Commander, which I don't believe. But they turned him into a snake, and then during the 90s, they decided to revamp all the characters and even bring back Cobra, and therefore make a brand new series, G.I. Joe Series 2. And Cobra has a new look. How about that? And that series had been around for a long time. Then around the late 90s, they decided to make something new for the G.I. Joes. So what they did, decided to make a brand new G.I. Joe series, and they only made one pilot, which it was Sgt.Savage and the Screaming Eagles. Sadly, didn't go well. Sgt.Savage and the Screaming Eagles didn't go on in the series. It was the only pilot, but they did make action figures. Isn't that right, Sergeant?
Yeah, it's true. You see, in my story, I was a soldier back in 1944, World War II. I was battling against an evil army who calls himself the Iron Army, until I was captured, used as a guinea pig, frozen in time, and during those years I became a super soldier. And
wait a minute. Was that an origin for was that an origin of Captain America?
I don't know, maybe?
I think I know. They combined two characters for Sergeant Savage. If you look at the artwork, it looks like a DC comic. And look what I found here. Huh. 1940s. World War II hero Steve Rogers, also known as Captain America. And he was into the super soldier serum, and then the war ended, and he was frozen on ice, and then they thaw him out into the present time. That's the same premise as Sergeant Savage, and also his artwork was a lot like, and made this DC character Sergeant Rock. What they were doing, they were combining Captain America and Captain Rock and create a superhero-like war hero like Sergeant Savage. And of course, his enemy, he battles against General Blitz and his Iron Army.
Yeah, that's true. But sadly, after Sergeant Savage and the Screaming Eagles didn't catch on, I joined another G.I. Joe team.
Oh yeah, one thing in around the late 90s they created, G.I. Joe Extreme. It was the 90s. Anything that has the word extreme in it is the 90s because it's catchy. Sadly, that was short-lived. And also, Sergeant Savage, that G.I. Joe Extreme uniform you're wearing, it doesn't look good on you.
Yeah, I know. I think I should put on my better. I feel more comfortable wearing my old-fashioned outfit than this G.I. Joe Extreme outfit. I look so damn ridiculous.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody created G.I. Joe Extreme, were a group of soldiers who are like 90s style. They made live action beginning and then the anime and try to destroy an evil bad guy who calls himself Claw. But sadly, G.I. Joe Extreme was short lived. Why? Because extreme, isn't it? And then after G.I. Joe Extreme, some of the Hasbro studios decided to make their own CGI movie. They did make G.I. Joe versus Cobra, and they used CGI as a commercial, which I collected all my G.I. Joe versus Cobra figures. But of course, I can't show them to you because, well, I didn't think about them. But I was hoping they would make a movie, but they did. But not as G.I. Joe versus Cobra, but G.I. Joe Spy Troop. In this one, Cobra Commander lives in his top secret building in the middle of the desert. And High Tech created this new device called Merc, Mind Remote Control. Mind induced remote control, where you can control vehicles with your mind. And Cobra is stealing it so they can create the Battle Android Troopers, controlled by Destro and Storm Shadow. And of course, the famous fight between Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow is in this movie. And of course, they introduce another Joe named Agent Faces, Master of the Skies. Since Cobra has her own Master of the Skies, Zartan, I think G.I. Joe definitely need a Master of the Skies himself. And then after that, Hasbro decided to make a brand new movie, which I have, G.I. Joe, Valor vs. Venom. In this one, Cobra keeps taking DNA from animals, and even also Cobra has been kidnapping random people from all over the globe, kidnapping them and inject them with venom serum so they turn them into human soldiers. I mean, animal soldiers, animal troops, called the Venom Troops. And they also kidnapped their general, General Hawk, and made him become Venomous Maximus, who is ruling the Venom Troops. Now, this movie was pretty good. As a die-hard Joe fan. And then the latest one I found was this. Of course, I always have a thing for ninjas. So, G.I. Joe Ninja Battle. Even though it's just an origin story about Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. You see, they were brothers to the clan called the Rashikage clan, until Cobra killed Storm Shadow's father, who was their master, and Storm Shadow thinks Snake Eyes killed his father, but they brainwashed him. But as soon as he knows that his father was murdered by Cobra and not by Storm Shadow, he will be a good member of the G.I. Joe team. And then you have a ninja battle with all the ninjas all together. It's just a short film. And then all of a sudden, when Michael Bay decided to make their Transformer movie, that's when they decided to make their version. Sadly, this one wasn't created by Michael Bay, thank God, but it was created by another director, and it was G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra. Now, the action side, it was pretty good. Pretty awesome. But as a die-hard G.I. Joe fan, no. This movie, it just butchered everything. And even the origin of Cobra turns out to be Duke's friend during the war, who faked his death but got wounded, and now he starts controlling people by becoming Cobra Commander. And then they decided to make a sequel, which was a way worse. And one thing I was really peed off about, they killed off Duke in the sequel movie. And it was G.I. Joe Resolution. And of course, they put The Rock as the head leader. I mean, as the one in charge after they kill off Duke. Oh yeah, and Rock is supposed to be a roadblock. And of course, they have Bruce Willis, who's saying that he is the original Joe. But the movie didn't turn out as good as I hope. And then after that, they decided to make a brand new series, and it looks kind of Japanese anime, and it's called G.I. Joe Sigma 6. I haven't seen it, so. And then the latest G.I. Joe they done made a brand new series of G.I. Joe called G.I. Joe Result. In this one, Cobra framed G.I. Joe for doing something that is against the government. So they made them all look like bad guys. So what the GI Joe supposed to do? They decided to fight to clear their names. Kind of remind me of the A-Team. So it's up to Duke, Scarlet, and Snake Eyes to prove their innocence by protecting America. And that was the last of the series. Well, what's going on here? Well, it turns out my old Arashikage clan brother Snake Eyes discovered there was another ninja terrorist who's trying to be better than Cobra. Oh yeah? Who's he?
It is I. I am Black Dragon, head of the Black Dragon Ninja Clan, and I'm trying to rule the world.
This time the G.I. Joe has to team up with Cobra in order to deal with against this ninja thug. Yeah, nobody tries to be a terrorist and try to take over the world without me involved. Ah, shut up, snake breath. Ah, shove it, loyal boy. Well, good luck, guys. You know, to me, I did not like those live-action movies, and they should do a better one. Actually, one thing I did hear that they're gonna make a brand new G.I. Joe movie, and as it turns out, it's supposed to be a Snake Eyes story. So I don't know if this is gonna go well or not. One thing I would complain about is that Rise of Cobra, they should have had one of the old boys in it. I mean, instead of having Brandon Fraser as their sergeant, they would have Sergeant Slaughter in it, and that would be awesome. But what a waste. We have captured Black Dragon, and we're bringing him over here. Good, bring him over. I want to see who is under the mask of Black Dragon.
I cannot believe you captured me.
Let's see who this Black Dragon really is.
Oh no.
Megatron from Beast Machines? So you're Black Dragon? Why?
Well, ever since at the end of Beast Wars and Beast Machines, I was just left out in the gutter, just like Maximum Primal, since Transformers are now back into population, that there was no need for us. So I guess I better become a terrorist somewhere else.
You better should, so get out of here. Good work, guys. Since Alliance is over, I think it's time that I and the Cobra Troop gotta get out of here. Wait, before you go, there's one thing I want to know. What is it? I want to see your face. I want to see what you look like under that mask.
Okay, then.
What in the hell?
What? You were so surprised at what I look like under there?
You just look just like Duke. How can that be?
It's because Cobra is my twin brother. He joined the G.I. Joe team known as Cobra, and it turns out that he was acting too much of a terrorist and less of a Joe. So they kicked him out of the G.I. Joe team, so he vowed vengeance against me and the Joes by becoming Cobra, the terrorist organization.
Huh. Well, it's a lot better than the movie origin or the cartoon movie origin.
Yes, that's true. But if you don't mind, I'm going back to my secret headquarters, continue on hiding and planning to take over the world. The world is mine.
Well, that's my review of G.I. Joe. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. G.I. Joe! And happy 4th of July, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if those of you are going to be wondering, guess what? I got all 3 of the Star Wars movies now. So now my next review, I'm going to review Star Wars for you folks, because the Force is strong within me. Hwah!
Too bad he didn't even review another movie. A movie that involves small soldiers who are toys who are electronically be able to move around. He should have reviewed this movie. Small Soldiers. It was a good movie ever made. And one thing I want to know for sure, after his Star Wars review, I'm going to make sure that Multi-Voice Reviewer is going to review this masterpiece. Alright, Commandos, time to open up a fresh can of whoop-ass.
Yeah, I almost forgot to show you folks. I got myself a new haircut. Look like I'm joining the army, huh? I wish. But, again, like this show, please leave a comment down below and hit like and subscribe. I'm the Multi-Voice Reviewer. I have many voices, but one opinion. And happy 4th of July.